Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. Kane no way planned for it to be, and that was the taradiddle he told himself over and over as the night unraveled into commodity he couldn't take back. It began with wrathfulness, hot, undetermined, stewing beneath weeks of pressure, commercial warfare, secrets piled on secrets, and the growing distance between him and Lily that he refused to name out loud. Phyllis had always been peril wrapped in familiarity, temptation disguised as understanding, and when she showed up at exactly the wrong moment with exactly the right words, Kane let himself fall. The line wasn't crossed all at formerly, it was cancelled sluggishly, in participated resentment, by rumored apologies, by the intoxicating comfort of being seen without being judged. One drink turned into another, allegations about Victor and Newman Enterprises turned into bitter horselaugh, and before Kane realized what he was doing, he was choosing escape rather of responsibility. When he woke up beside Phyllis, the weight of what he'd done hit him like a physical blow, not because he didn't know more, but because he did. This wasn't passion. It was tone destruction. And deep down, Kane formerly knew the cost would be Lily. The remorse came presto, brutal, and enduring. Kane slightly met Phyllis's eyes as reality set in, his mind formerly contending ahead to Lily, her strength, her fidelity, the way she had stood by him when no bone differently would. Phyllis, for her part, didn't pretend it meant further than it was. She no way did. That was part of her power and her peril. She read the guilt on Kane's face and nearly ached him, reminding him in her sharp, unapologetic way that choices were choices and consequences didn't watch about intentions. Kane left without looking back, each step heavier than the last, knowing that whatever was broken inside him had now shattered commodity sacred outside of him. The treason wasn't just physical, it was emotional, moral, and deeply particular. And fate, as it always did, moved briskly than he anticipated. Lily didn't hear it from gossip. She didn't hear it from an adversary or a rumored scuttlebutt passed through Genoa City like campfire. She heard it in Kane's silence. In the way he couldn't look at her. In the vacillation before he answered the simplest questions. Lily had survived too important in her life to ignore instinct, and when the verity eventually surfaced, raw, unattractive, and inarguable, it felt like the air was ripped from her lungs. Kane's attempt at explanation only made it worse. He spoke of pressure, miscalculations, losing himself, but Lily heard commodity additional entirely that when effects got hard, he chose himself over them. Over her. The pain wasn't loud at first. It was quiet, controlled, frightening in its restraint. When Lily eventually spoke, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't throw allegations or demand justifications. She simply looked at Kane, really looked at him, and said three words that cut deeper than any outburst ever could: I trusted you. That was it. No elaboration. No dramatics. Just verity, delivered with ruinous clarity. Those three words shattered Kane fully. In that moment, he understood that treason wasn't about the act, it was about breaking the faith someone placed in you when they believed you were safe. Lily's pain wasn't explosive, it was surgical, precise, and unrecoverable. And Kane realized with horrifying certainty that he'd just lost commodity he might no way get back. The fallout spread presto. Genoa City always watched, always rumored, always judged. Kane set up himself insulated, trapped between public scrutiny and private guilt. Phyllis moved on as she always did, unapologetic, realistic, refusing to carry guilt that wasn't hers to bear. But Kane couldn't escape the echo of Lily's words. They visited him in boardrooms, in empty apartments, in the silence of his own studies. Every attempt to justify his conduct collapsed under the weight of that simple verity: he'd betrayed the woman who believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. His dark turn wasn't just sleeping with Phyllis, it was allowing bitterness and pride to stamp love and respect. Lily, meanwhile, retreated into herself, stronger than ever yet visibly wounded. She didn't supplicate. She didn't chase check. She chose quality. That choice hurt Kane further than wrathfulness ever could. Watching Lily stand altitudinous without him forced Kane to defy who he'd come, and who he'd failed to be. Remorse settled in his casket like a endless pang, a memorial that some miscalculations doen't come with alternate chances. As alliances shifted and adversaries circled, one thing remained sorrowfully clear: Kane crossed a line he could end abolish, and Lily's 3 words would define the rest of his story. In Genoa City, treason always comes with a price, and this time, Kane paid it with everything that signified most. Kane tried to move forward after that moment, but life in Genoa City had a way of refusing to let injuries scar still. Every hallway, every boardroom, every familiar corner of the megacity sounded to echo Lily's voice, "I trusted you," until those 3 words came louder than any blameworthiness ever could. He told himself he merited the insulation, the sideways aesthetics, the unforeseen lack of abettors who formerly eagerly shook his hand. Trust, he learned too late, was currency, and he'd gone void overnight. Indeed, those who despised Phyllis didn't vindicate Kane. If anything, they judged him more roughly for knowing exactly who she was and stepping over the line anyway. The narrative snappily came clear: Kane Ashby hadn't been enticed, he had chosen. And that choice reshaped how everyone saw him, including the man gaping back from the glass each morning. Lily, on the other hand, refused to deteriorate in public, but the private cost was stunning. In the quiet moments, when she was alone with her studies, the treason replayed itself in fractions: recollections of late-night exchanges, participated dreams, promises spoken vocally and believed fully. The most painful part wasn't imagining Kane with Phyllis, it was realizing that while she had been fighting for their future, Kane had been still slipping down. Lily questioned everything, not her worth, but her judgment. How had she missed the signs? Or worse, had she ignored them because love had induced her she was safe? That consummation hardened her resoluteness. Lily decided she'd not be the woman whose story revolved around a man's mistake. However, she'd take a decisive one, toward independence, clarity, if Kane had taken a dark turn. When Kane eventually tried to apologize again, truly apologize, stripped of defenses, Lily stopped him with a single raised hand. She didn't need explanations presently. She had formerly reused the verity in the harshest way possible. Kane spoke anyway, because silence felt unsupportable, confessing that sleeping with Phyllis hadn't filled a void, hadn't fixed his wrathfulness, hadn't given him peace. It had exposed commodity unattractive inside him, a mean ability to tone sabotage when he felt helpless. He admitted he abominated himself for it, that remorse had come a constant companion, that he'd undo it all if he could. Lily heated, calm and composed, and that countenance scarified him. Because wrathfulness could fade. Gashes could dry. But this? This was final. Lily told him that guilt didn't restore trust and love didn't survive discourteousness. Her words weren't cruel. They were honest. And honesty, Kane realized, was the one thing he'd failed to give her when it signified most. Phyllis watched the fallout from a distance, her expression undecipherable. She didn't chase Kane, didn't apologize to Lily, didn't pretend she hadn't known exactly what she was doing. In her world, feelings were munitions and survival needed unapologetic choices. Still, indeed, she couldn't deny the shift. Kane wasn't the same man she'd crossed the line with. The confidence was gone, replaced by a heaviness that no quantum of bravado could mask. When she eventually brazened him, sharp words, sharper tone, Kane surprised her by taking full responsibility. He didn't condemn temptation. He didn't condemn circumstances. He criticized himself. That, further than anything, unsettled Phyllis. Because men who possessed their miscalculations were dangerous in a different way, they changed. And Phyllis wasn't sure she liked where this change might lead. As the days passed, the professional stakes boosted, blurring dangerously with the particular. Kane threw himself into work, hoping strategy and ambition could drown out guilt, but indeed success tasted concave. Lily's absence was louder than any palm. She, meanwhile, began reconsidering her boundaries with ruthless clarity. She no longer explained herself. She no longer softened her opinions for anyone's comfort. When people asked if she and Kane would attune, she didn't answer. Silence came her guard. And that silence spoke volumes. It told Genoa City that Lily Winters was done carrying the emotional weight of someone differently's failure. The moment that broke Kane fully came suddenly. He eavesdropped Lily defending him in a discussion where she had every reason not to. She didn't excuse what he'd done, didn't minimize the treason, but she refused to let others rewrite their history as a taradiddle. She conceded the love that had was, the cooperation they formerly participated, indeed as she stood establishment in walking down. That grace shattered Kane further than rage ever could. It forced him to defy the final verity. Lily wasn't chastising him. She was guarding herself. And that meant he'd lost her not to incense, but to clarity. Late one night, alone and stripped of all distractions, Kane eventually accepted what he'd been avoiding since the morning. Sleeping with Phyllis hadn't been a mistake born of passion, it had been a choice embedded in fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of not measuring up. Fear of getting inapplicable. And in trying to escape those fears, he'd destroyed the one relationship that anchored him. Lily's 3 words echoed again, but this time they converted. I trusted you wasn't just in blameworthiness, it was a memorial of what he'd been able of, formerly. Trust given. Trust earned. Trust lost. By the time Kane decided to change, not to win Lily back, but to become someone good of trust again, it was formerly too late for easy judgments. Some islands, formerly burned, left scars indeed if rebuilt. Lily moved forward with her life, stronger, wiser, unintentional to look backward. Kane was left with the consequences, the remorse, and the understanding that his darkest turn wasn't crossing the line with Phyllis, it was believing he could do so without losing himself. In Genoa City, treason no way ends fairly. It lingers. It reshapes fates. And for Kane Ashby, it marked the moment everything changed ever. Kane told himself that time would dull the pang, that ultimately the sharp edges of remorse would soften into commodity manageable. But time, rather of mending, came a glass, reflecting every poor decision back at him with brutal clarity. Each morning he woke with the same concave feeling in his casket, the same instinct to reach for a life that was no longer his. Lily had moved forward with purpose, not bitterness, and that ever hurt more than if she had torn him piecemeal in public. Her strength came a constant memorial of what he'd broken. Kane began to understand that the topmost discipline wasn't losing Lily's love, it was losing the interpretation of himself that had been good of it. Word traveled presto through Genoa City, as it always did. Some people offered sympathy wrapped in thinly veiled judgment. Others were less subtle, treating Kane like an exemplary tale rumored about at parties and power lunches. He felt the shift in how doors opened pokily, how alliances dithered, how trust, formerly freely given, now needed evidence he didn't yet know how to give. The treason with Phyllis had ingrained him, not as a villain exactly, but as a man able of crossing lines when pressure mounted. And in a megacity erected on secrets, character was everything. Lily, meanwhile, set up herself at an unanticipated crossroads. Walking down from Kane had been the hardest decision of her life, but it also stripped down times of emotional concession she hadn't realized she'd been making. For the first time in a long while, she asked herself what she wanted without factoring in anyone additional's requirements. The answer unsettled her. She wanted peace. She wanted control over her own narrative. And she wanted distance, from Kane, from Phyllis, from any memorial of a treason that had nearly readdressed her sense of safety. Lily poured herself into work, into rebuilding not just her career but her identity. She wasn't running, she was choosing herself. The ineluctable battle between Lily and Phyllis came still, without unfollowership. No shouting. No theatrics. Just 2 women standing on contrary sides of a verity that neither could undo. Phyllis didn't apologize, that wasn't her way. But she didn't bewail moreover. She conceded Lily's pain with an honesty that surprised them both, admitting that lines had been crossed with eyes wide open. Lily heated, composed but visibly wounded, and told Phyllis commodity she hadn't anticipated to say that the treason wasn't Phyllis's burden to carry. It was Kane's. That clarity freed Lily in a way she hadn't anticipated. It also left Phyllis unsettled, forced to defy the collateral damage she so frequently dismissed as the cost of survival. Kane, ignorant of that exchange, reached a breaking point of his own. One night, alone with nothing but his studies, he eventually allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he'd done, not just to Lily, but to the future they'd imagined together. The house felt wrong without her presence, filled with echoes of exchanges that would no way be finished. He stopped pretending he was fighting for redemption and admitted the verity he was grieving. Mourning the loss of trust. Mourning the certainty that love, formerly earned, was endless. And grieving the vision that he could overrun the consequences of his choices. When Kane and Lily crossed paths again, it wasn't planned. It happened in the most mundane way possible, whichever made it more painful. No dramatic music. No precisely prepared speeches. Just familiarity colliding with reality. Kane saw in Lily's eyes that she had changed, not hardened, but clarified. She wasn't staying for him to prove anything. She wasn't measuring his guilt. She had formally moved past the point where his growth signified to her mending. And that consummation forced Kane to defy a verity he'd been avoiding. Occasionally love does end in remission. Occasionally it ends in acceptance. He tried, formerly more, not to maintain but to admit. He told Lily that her 3 words, "I trusted you," had reshaped him, that they had come a compass guiding every decision since. Lily didn't dismiss that. She believed him. But belief didn't equal conciliation. She told him commodity just as still devastating. That trust, formerly broken at that position, was commodity she was willing to go on again. Not with him. Not with anyone who had formerly proven able of hurting her so deeply. There was no wrathfulness in her voice, only resoluteness. And Kane eventually understood that the chapter they participated was unrestricted, not out of malignancy, but out of tone preservation. Phyllis watched Kane helical inward and honored the signs of a man standing at the edge of metamorphosis, or destruction. She advised him, in her own blunt way, that wallowing wouldn't fix anything, that guilt without action was just another form of egoism. Kane didn't argue. He knew she was right. What surprised her was his response. He didn't ask for comfort, didn't seek distraction, didn't indeed try to rewrite history. He told her he demanded to step down, from her, from the chaos, from the interpretation of himself that had chosen escape over integrity. That decision marked the final ramifying of whatever bond had formed between them. Phyllis let him go, fating that this was one story she couldn't control. As months passed, the reproach faded into memory, replaced by newer backstabbings, fresher drama, and louder explosions away in Genoa City. But for Kane and Lily, the impact remained deeply particular. Lily continued to rise, admired for her strength and respected for her turndown to settle for half-trueness or tentative fidelity. Kane rebuilt sluggishly, sorrowfully, learning that responsibility wasn't a performance, it was a life. He didn't anticipate remission presently. He concentrated on getting someone who would no way again hear those 3 words spoken with disappointment. And yet, late at night, when the megacity quieted and reflection crept by, Kane still allowed of Lily. Not with craving, but with gratefulness. She had loved him completely. She had trusted him fully. And losing that trust had bring him more than any rival ever could. In the end, Kane's darkest turn didn't define him, but it did transfigure him. Lily's pain came his reckoning. Her 3 words came his heritage. And in Genoa City, where treason frequently energies power, this one sculpted commodity deeper assignment written in remorse, adaptability, and the unrecoverable verity that some lines, formerly crossed, change everything ever. Kane tried to explain himself to others, hoping that if someone, anyone, understood his remorse, it might dull the pain. But explanations chimed concave. He could describe the pressure, the insulation, the moment of weakness, yet none of it changed the outgrowth. He crossed a line. And worse, he crossed it knowing exactly who Lily was and what her trust meant. That consummation stripped down his last reason. He wasn't confused that night with Phyllis. He wasn't manipulated. He was selfish. Accepting that verity felt like swallowing glass, but denial hurt worse. Phyllis re-enlisted his route suddenly, as she always did, drawn not by craving but untreated business. She challenged him, indicted him of rewriting history, of placing all the emotional fallout on her shoulders while he played the part of the tortured victim. Kane didn't argue. For formerly, he didn't redirect or provoke. He told her plainly that while she hadn't betrayed Lily, he had, and that was commodity he'd carry alone. Phyllis scarfed at first, but indeed she tasted the shift. The man standing in front of her wasn't chasing forgiveness or confirmation. He was retaining the damage. That unsettled her further than any battle ever had. The hardest moment came when Kane eventually realized Lily wasn't staying for him to come more. She wasn't testing him. She wasn't hoping he'd prove himself good again. Lily had formally closed that chapter. When Kane approached her one final time not to ask for conciliation, but to admit the end, Lily met him with calm certainty. She told him she forgave him, not because he merited it, but because she merited peace. Remission, she explained, wasn't authorization to return. It was release. That distinct